Lev. I'm the founder and CEO of Cleanlist AI. Previously, I led growth at Keep, and after that at Float Financial, which are two of Canada's, I guess, Brex and Ramp equivalents. Now I'm working on Cleanlist full time.
And so obviously one of the unique things with like this whole go-to-market tech stack thing is how people get into this type of industry. Were you initially a sales rep who got more technical? Were you a technical person who liked the sales? How did you end up in these type of roles? Because it's like a unique hodgepodge of sales skills with also understanding some level of technology in the tech stack.
Yeah, great question. I think probably take a step back and talk about what Cleanlist actually is, because I'm assuming most people listening won't know. Cleanlist is a go-to-market orchestration platform. Essentially, our goal is to make playbooks and repeatable sales motions accessible to all orgs between the SMB and mid-market. My background, I did start off as a sales rep. So my background is a little bit like growth and sales. So even before my first ever job, I like doing e-commerce. Everyone did the drop shipping phase, right? But I did start my career off as a BDR. I worked my way up to, BD team lead and then to managing growth. This is at a company called Litmus. They're Toronto based. And then I started my own lead gen agency, actually. We did great. So we were doing, I think, like 6 figures a month back in like late 2023, early 2024. And it was really successful. We had a lot of luck with, it was also great timing with government initiatives, programs that the government of Canada had running. So we had a ton of partners that we were generating leads for. But the original conception of Cleanlist comes from that time, figuring out that like the manual processes I had when I was an individual BDR cannot be scaled to an entire go-to-market org when I had 20, 25 reps who were doing dials every day. So kind of needed to start building a lot of the processes that Cleanlist is built on, the original frameworks of them, the original processes of them, start rolling them out. And then we've been iterating. And then that's kind of how Cleanlist came to be.
And obviously right now there's like a new AI tool every week.
Yeah.
We're seeing through YC. What made you go, okay, I'm going to build this myself versus like, okay, were you like looking up other tools saying, hey, there's always something off. There's always not like, what made you go with the image saying, you know what, I'm going to build it. Tools aren't really as effective out there. Cause that's always an interesting conversation, even for an organization, build or buy. What made you, now you're pretty obviously very successful with Cleanlist. What made you go down the build route rather than trying to find something off the shelf initially through these days, especially working at the organizations you're at?
Well, I did go down the buy path. So especially a lot of my career, Clay is obviously like a platform everyone knows and loves now. And I started using Clay, I guess, what is it, like 2022-ish? So relatively like earlier adopter compared to their success that came later on. And just while there is things that you can do with Clay, there's like, you can build motions with Apollo, all these other platforms. I kept finding before I even had the idea for Cleanlist, it felt like it wasn't built for the natural sales team. It wasn't something where like anyone could pick up and learn. Like I truly always believe that like for something to become scalable within an org, it needs to be something that can be understood by anyone. And the issue with like Clay is like, you have a new role, GTM engineer, which has come from it. It's awesome marketing, but really it's should there be a platform that's that complex that you need a special role for? And this is like kind of hypocritical of me because my background is also in GTM engineering. So I came from that, but that's kind of where the inception of Cleanlist lies, is like, I believe these go-to-market playbooks should be so simple that really like anyone can set up, and they shouldn't require like someone like a full-time headcount to be able to manage them, build them, scale them. One full-time headcount if you're lucky, probably multiple. And that's where I like sit on this build versus buy debate. I think like you can build a lot of this stuff. But I believe the future is lack of friction. And I think that's where like the largest challenges with the current platforms in the market. There's always some level of friction. If you use
Mhm.
Apollo, there's this one thing that you can't do without upgrading your plan. If you use Zoom Info, then you're constricted in this specific regard. If you use Clay, you can't it's not like fully autonomously drivable
Mhm.
yet through like Claude, et cetera. There's always these little friction points, and I think the perfect platform is one that is built for the end user.
Yeah, it's what I found really interesting is we did the same thing a little bit later. We jumped on the Clay bandwagon. We bought this solution. It looks simple. It's an Excel sheet. You're like, oh, I've used Excel since I was a child. This
Yeah,
is going to be easy. Hey, I'm like, where there's no AM. Like, this is a different style. And I'm like, okay, look, where do I learn to use this tool? And they're like, well, you pay a Clay agency. And I said, oh, okay. So for implementation, I had maybe 10 calls. I called everyone on the list. They said, we're 10K. I mean, they're different prices. I'm gonna go to the more dramatic one. We're $10,000 a month. You tell us what lists you want, and we give you the lists. And I said, well, are you gonna teach me how to use them? And they said, nope. You pay us. And they said, instead of hiring a sales rep, you can hire me. And I said, you're more than a sales rep. How is this helping me? And then eventually I self-taught Clay. I mean, once you learn it isn't as complex, but there's still so many different. It's almost like it is what I would call like a no coding tool back in the day when no coding was more technical than the
yeah, for sure.
lovables. So you can not have to be technical, but it was just an interesting model. This reminded me a lot of the early days, and I guess still like Salesforce, where you buy Salesforce and then you buy a Salesforce implementation
Exactly. Yeah,
specialist.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's this. I didn't grow up in that level of tech. Throughout my career, everything was self-serve. You had onboarding, and then this unique thing was interesting to see. And I think that's one thing I get. I mean, I'm even through all my projects, I'm building a new tool a week or doing a lot of AI implementation and helping a lot of companies. And the same thing is, well, we can build this ourselves. And as you know, that is true. I can cook every meal. I don't have
Yeah.
to go to a restaurant. Yet there's still restaurants out there. I have a very very expensive espresso machine behind me. I still buy coffee, and I think people, it's hard to make that connection with software. Like, you could build everything yourself, but you're not an expert at that. You don't know how to refine the process, and especially at a organizer enterprise scale, those inefficiencies add up, and you need a team to manage it. So I think it's an interesting thing we're going to see more and more, where the UI UX ease of use, the simplicity, is really where a lot of SaaS will fall. Because at the very high, if you have your whole engineering team, you can build it yourself. You're still kind of doing it like Google has teams for just internal tools years ago. So I think it's an interesting thing where it's this whole like, how do I make my life easier? And I'm really finding, I guess, your product market fit, your niche is so important.
Exactly.
When you started building the when you start building it, obviously it was for yourself. At what point did you start saying, okay, let's see if I can commercialize this? I can start seeing if there's a business here rather than maybe a tool you were using or kind of building as a passion project? Or was it that, hey, this is a business from day one? How'd you go from that ideation to commercialization journey?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Originally, it started off as I was just trying to solve my own issues. Like I said,
Mhm.
as a BDR, I was trying to automate a lot of my processes. And then I had a lead gen agency trying to automate processes for a team of 25 people. And so, it's like you're figuring out it as you go. Like, you're not exactly, I wasn't exactly thinking like, oh, this is going to end up becoming Cleanlist, what it is today. But as I was building it and as I was realizing how much complexity is actually involved with making this like actually an intelligent system, combining
Mhm.
these workflows, these agentic flows essentially
Mhm.
together, and making sure that this thing runs smoothly, like the maintenance, the ability to scale this to like more than just what you have built for today. Um, that's when it started hitting me. That I was like, okay, I probably need like a team with me to do this.
Mhm.
So that's how I met my co-founders. One of my co-founders, Victor, him and I have known each other since we were like 12 years old. We grew up on the same street in Oakville. And he, I got to give a lot of credit to him. We've worked together at like 3 companies.
Oh, wow.
My first business when I was doing drop shipping, I learned from him. When we were 16, he posted a screenshot on his Instagram. I remember, and it was like this dashboard of his Shopify app, and it said 80,000. And I just like instantly dropped everything. I drove over to his house, had some Timbits with me, and I said like, get in the car, we're going for a ride. And I was like,
Yeah.
tell me everything. How did you accomplish this? So we've always been in like business together. And my other 2 co-founders, they also went to U of T with Victor. So Salinger when we've been working together for like 3 years now, and like we kind of just all met up, and like I kind of told them like what I'm considering building, what I'm envisioning, and we were just like, it was like a holy shit moment, you know. Like, let's get this.
And that's so important. I think that's what's always interesting with startups, like the founding team, and also having, I always be having a previous relationship or knowing someone from before is so important because, as you know, you can go, there's a lot of these network events. You'll meet people, and then you meet them, and everyone's happy. Everyone's trying to. It's like for the
Yeah,
classic example, like the first date. Everyone's happy, but if you don't have those like knowledge base, or at least have at least some experiences working with them, when stuff gets hard, that's when real people, the
exactly.
emotions come out, the real person. So you have to be able to say, okay, we're going to go through a very stressful situation together. Can we work well enough together to continue? Because when things are going good, when you're making money, or when the ideation stage, every startup goes through this, where you're just thinking, like, oh my, I'm going to start a business, I'm going to buy a yacht, I'm an IPO. It's all fun
Yeah.
and exciting. And then when the real work hits, you're like, okay, how do we work together and really push this through? So that's always interesting, the kind of the founding story here. And obviously, one of the things that I keep hearing, especially on the go to market side, is the building and scaling and the commoditization of all these things that you see. There's a lot of these people using the Apollos, or using all these different CRMs. How do you stay focused on building you call it like a specific product and not having massive scope creep? Because a lot of times I talk to founders, and it's so easy, especially in this Claude Code AI world. It's like, well, just add this feature, add this feature, and then
Oh my god, I
you have
was
everything.
literally.
And I think the idea, and this is, I think the idea is like, well, like my customer asked for this, I'll build it. Sounds good in practice, in principle, like sounds good, but in reality, then you don't really have a product. You're a little bit of everything and not great at anything. And it's very hard to sell them when you're like, well, we do everything. Customer doesn't know what they're looking for. How do you really refine what you're trying to do and offer so customers understand what they're going to, when it's so easy just to spin up A, B, C, and D or E feature so
Yeah.
quickly these days?
Yeah. No, that's such a great point. I've been having this conversation for the last few weeks with a lot of my friends who are also founders, or in the dev space and the go to market space. These days, there's so much of what you described, like that scope creep. Um,
Mhm.
and like the observation I guess I've made is there is just so much shallowness in tech these days. You know, back in the
Mhm.
day, it was hard to build tech. And so the companies that made it are the ones that are like constantly building, iterating, and obviously not iterating at the scale of today. We're kind of having
Mhm.
like a hockey stick curve
Mhm.
in terms of like development scale and what's possible. But um, like everyone is covering surface area, but the depth of the platforms these days are becoming more and more shallow because there's
Mhm.
just so much that you can do. And yeah, you know, it's easy to launch 10 Claude agents. It's like, one of you go build me a Salesforce integration, one of you build me a HubSpot one of you build me like a this, that, and the other. But that's where like things get really tricky, especially with like maintainability, scalability. If something goes wrong in one of them, if you if you're a solo founder and you have like 30 features, um, it's tough to maintain all of that, especially if you start adding depth to them because there's so many layers of things that can go wrong. Um, I think the way that we prevent it at Cleanlist, especially, is like our vision is like extremely clear. Like we know exactly what we're building, like our mission statement, simplifying go to market for all SMB mid market teams. It's really clear to us, and I think like that's where we stand so strong. Is like we don't want to become a platform that becomes so immensely complex that um, you need to learn how to use it. Essentially, like it's like day one you should log on to Cleanlist and that experience should be driven for you, and you should be able to understand it immediately, and that really helps in reducing that scope creep because we're preventing ourselves by our like mission
Mhm.
from going down the route of just like insane levels of feature building. We're sticking to the things that we want to make best, which is GTM. So you won't use Cleanlist and be able to like pull Gong meeting recordings in and then like do an
Mm.
analysis for what percentage of them mentioned this close lost reason, right? Like that's the sort of stuff that like if you want you can use like Clay, Data Bar, all these other platforms to do. But we're so heavily focused on like this go to market orchestration and playbooks, that helps us stay to our true craft, which is really like the A to Z of go to market. How do you make that process like
Mhm.
a 3 hour thing to a 2 minute thing, and then make a system that you would have had to take months and months to build, something that you turn on once and self iterates itself.
Mhm. That's such a great example with the taking the gong notes and having the analysis there, because I know many founders I spoke to. That's like such an easy thing to do relative, like with AI, like
Yeah.
transcript, summarize. That's a new feature for our app. We now can
Yeah.
do all these things. Like, and I think what you're touching on, especially because your background in the go to market and sales and marketing side, is adding more features typically doesn't help close a deal, because
Yeah.
now the customer is making more comparisons. It's the whole
Yeah.
idea of like, where do you want to eat? Well, there's
Yeah.
so many options. Like, well, we have all this food. Or, well, now it's just too overwhelming. And then I think it's the same thing like anything else. You can't explain your product simply, or if the person you're selling to can't explain to the person making the purchasing decision,
Exactly.
it's just so hard
Yeah.
to move forward. I think that's an interesting thing we're seeing with the AI thing, where it's very, like you said, very shallow
Yeah.
because it's so easy. And I think one thing someone told me who was an engineer, who had like previously a bunch of different startups and now is obviously building very AI focused. He said the biggest difference and why AI slop, or we're seeing this big issue, is the fact that before it took you a week to develop a feature or like a button, or
Hmm.
months, you spend a month thinking about the idea and realizing maybe 2 days in, well, this is a really stupid idea. Now it's
Hmm.
so quick, you don't have that time to even have regret or think through it, because it's easier to build than to think almost. I think that's one of the
Yeah.
other challenges is, did you ever stop and ask why or should we do this? And
Yeah.
I've seen that more and more because it's just exciting to build and annoying to
That's
really
something
refine.
actually.
Mhm.
This is something really unique that I'm really grateful for my time at Flow. I
Mhm.
learned from Ruslan and Rob.
Mhm.
They're really heavy on like writing and thinking and like data backed decision making, and something like we implemented here at Cleanlist as well.
Mhm.
It's one of our like core philosophies. Like
Mhm.
you have to have a reason before you execute. And I see a lot of founders and a lot of just everyone really taking that route that you mentioned, which is like it's just so easy to build and it's so easy to go out there and do things. But like vibes based decision making is only ever going to get you so far. And you need to be 100% sure on the decisions that you're making, especially as a founder, so that you make sure that you're taking your business down the right path. Obviously, you'll never know 100% if
Mhm.
you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
There needs to be reason for what you're doing, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I think like I'm seeing so often like features in products where I'm like, this almost doesn't feel like it belongs here. It's
Mhm.
almost like you essentially have to know when to tell a customer no, like we
Yeah.
can't do that, because it's so easy these days. If someone comes to you and they were looking for, um, it's like someone comes to Cleanlist and they're looking to do B2C outreach. We don't support B2C data, right? But
Mhm.
it'd be really easy for another provider to say, hey, you know what, we will pick up B2C data. But then that introduces so many new challenges in the way that you operate, your like data schemas that you run on, like
Yeah.
how you integrate all these different data providers, right? Like for Cleanlist, we have like 25 different data sources and databases that we're combining into one. I can't imagine like trying to throw on another like 10 to 15 databases, making them all work together. Um, it's just essentially like you
Mhm.
have to know when that time comes to say no. And we do that through like writing. Like at
Mhm.
Cleanlist, it's like it might sound silly for such an early stage company, but all four of the founders, even our intern, like
Mhm.
every decision has a memo attached to it. Um,
Interesting.
and it really doesn't take that long. Like at first when I started at Float, I remember I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to write for every like project I want to work on. But it helps you sharpen your thinking before every decision you make, right? Because if you're about to go on like a product decision or a go-to-market
Mhm.
decision that's going to take weeks and weeks, you better be sure that like you have a thesis that you're trying to achieve. So yeah, that's how we
It
operate.
like how you touched on that, because it's so, like you said, people have this fear, like they have to remove so fast, and like I have no time. It's the classic example, and this is more in the traditional life, and everyone's like, well, I don't have time to work out. Like I don't have time for my health. But then you meet very successful people, and the answer is like, well, you always have time. You never regret a workout. Like you just need to make the time. And running fast in the wrong direction is just in the wrong direction. And I think what's interesting is I've seen the same thing where it's like, well, planning and talking, we're wasting all this time. But then you look at their build history, and then they spent 3 months shipping nothing because there's always they'll go halfway, then they'll have to go back. And I think that's an interesting thing is nothing is as fast as people think it is to some extent, but obviously like front loading the decision making and understanding is so important. I've even seen it myself. I love fountain pens, so I have like a lot of fountain pens. And I have a bunch of inks behind me. I don't know why I have horrible handwriting, but now I'm forcing myself as of recent to like write out my ideas, write out my time, because that extra step, even on typing on Google Docs, it's just too easy to throw it into Claude or throw it into an AI or not realize what I'm typing, where I'm handwriting because I'm just not used to it. I'm forcing myself to think through the words, think through the process, map out and draw it out. And it's just helps my future decisions move quicker. Because once you know where you want to go, you can run so fast. It's just like
Totally.
anything, the decision making is
It's that
a
80
skill
20
set.
rule. It's
Yeah.
like you got to spend 80% of your time planning and 20% of your time executing. Um, I think when we started Cleanlist originally, when we were building, we probably spent 90% of the time building and 10% of the time thinking. Um, and over time, we iterated, we learned, like, we kind of sharpened up, we learned what we were working on. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's like so important. Just you need to spend most of your time considering the action that you're going to take, because once you have that dead set, then the actual execution part, especially these days, is like relatively simple.
Mhm. And I think that's when I was working on a few ideas before working for a few startups, they would always say, is this a lifestyle business or a real business? If it's a lifestyle business, it's all vibes based because
Yeah,
it's just for fun. But if you're trying to have real business, you need to have a framework, rigidity. You need to have customers who want to pay for it. And like you touched on, by saying no, it's easier to get to a yes because now you're built for someone rather than regression to the mean where you're built for no one.
yeah,
And no one wants to pay for something that is not great. And I think that's always the challenge, like you said, being able to say no that really have that core value. So the customers who should be buying it are buying it.
hmm
And one thing that's also, I know we talked about this before, interesting with your product is your chat base as well. I think what's really interesting is this move away or changing UI UX. For now, it's using natural language and having communication. How when you were building that, like obviously, is that common? Like in the go-to-market space, is that more of a common feature? Are you seeing more users use it chat-based rather than clicking on buttons? Because that's an interesting shift. Like not
yeah,
that old, 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, you wouldn't be having discussion like, how does your chat-based navigate your website? How have you found that
yeah,
implementation and iteration? Because I feel that's like not the new is the new thing, but interesting to see in products more and more and how often it's being used.
yeah, yeah. I think yeah, it used to be something that was really unique. These days, it's really not that unique, and it
Mm-hmm.
really is not that hard to build. Like building a chat-based interface is actually quite simple. It's
Mm-hmm.
um, not difficult to get out at all, but it's the matter of, again, understanding and like the planning and the sort of process behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's easy to put together a chat-based interface, but what's not easy to do is understand exactly what the user experience will be behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, and we're fortunate in the sense that, like, our first customers like Float, Proposify, Kindsight, Warp, a lot of these companies that we work
Mm-hmm.
with in this like mid-market space, these
Mm-hmm.
really like forward-thinking go-to-market orgs, they help us shape the product experience. And so we, have sessions with their sales orgs, their go-to-market leadership, and we understand exactly what like that day-to-day needs to look like and what is the experience that we're essentially solving for. Um, and so like the chat based interface is great, and like so many platforms these days I think have it. And I think like if we have this convo in 6 months
Mm-hmm.
again, probably like 90% of products will have a chat based interface. But it's about optimizing for that experience, right? Because the real key of like the chat based interface that's coming these days is like, and I think a lot of people aren't realizing like what's so special about this is there is like, when you're building a product, especially for like the last 10 years, how it's been, you essentially are building as many features as you can in a way that people will be able to understand, synthesize, and use them, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a learning curve for them. What AI, what we have now in these chat-based systems is you can actually hide like thousands of endpoints within a chatbot. And the chatbot understands and interprets how to use them correctly. And so essentially you give your users like 1,000x the abilities that they had before, because they can combine all of these different tools without even seeing them or clicking
Mm-hmm.
the buttons themselves, right? Um, like if you imagine Clay 4 or 5 years ago, if you were using it,
Mhm.
you do like a person level research, you filter out everyone who has like X information filled
Mhm.
out, then you add a new column in and you run a new research, you do a waterfall, and all of this stuff. It takes you hours and hours to like get done and build. With AI, like you can just have this figure it out itself, and essentially you can use like 1,000 tools in the span of like a minute, and you never realize that that even happened in the background. And that's the challenge of it. Like, how do you sort of train the model to understand the process of what you're looking to achieve without it kind of becoming something that the user even has to sort of acknowledge?
Mhm. I think that's what's so interesting. But I think it's also, I think we're going to see as it gets more common is how do you have a unique chat to some extent, just because again, how do you gear them in the right direction as well is it's the journey mapping is so important, especially with this one. I mean, we're talking a lot about AI here in your day to day, even or even a lot of the go to market stuff. Where do you think maybe that you were using AI a lot more in the past? And you kind of touched on this with the memos. Where some of you were using a lot of AI tools in the past, and now you're using less, or to less extent, like where are you adding the human elements back in, or where have you found the human elements play a bigger role where maybe the AI use case isn't there yet, and or the personalization
Yeah,
still allows the process to work better? Because you always hear about adding AI to everything, but has there been a place where you're not necessarily removing it, but realizing, okay, we need humans here, because whether it be decision making or the outreach style for the cold calling, because the AI agents just can't dial as effectively. How have you
yeah,
found that learning as you've kind of gone through this like hyper
yeah,
growth stage as
yeah.
well?
Yeah, I see this a lot in a lot of companies. This like AI slop creep that's happening, and I think it's like this like lack of almost thinking. There's this like slop thinking, I call it, where you can tell from like what someone's written or the work that's been done that you've almost let like the AI both think for you and execute for you. And that's something that like we really avoid at Cleanlist is like
Mhm.
everything that we do, everything that we build, every like memo we write, the original like hypothesis is yours. You
Mhm.
are writing based off of your own thinking still. And so sure, you can have AI help you like fast track a memo, right? Um, but we try to avoid having that sort of like thinking slop where like people dump out like 15-20 page memos these days, and it's like it's so easy to do, right? Like who was going to write 15 to 20 pages 10 years
Yeah.
ago for every minor thing? But it's important to still maintain that level of like synthesizing something in a page or two, and being able to do it like coherently. um, Regarding how like we're implementing human based stuff, like I'd say like we're extremely like AI driven. Like we're
Mhm.
very AI forward, right? Like again, as I mentioned, it's important to keep like that human element involved,
Mhm.
but everyone at Cleanlist has like their AI brain set up. Essentially every single email that comes in, every gong call
Mhm.
you have, every meeting recording, everything feeds into like a AI brain. Essentially it's like just an Obsidian, a bunch of .md files in Obsidian.
Mhm.
And we kind of query against that. It helps you like build that repository and helps you build your like level of thinking, so that you can query against it. You can like, it's been extremely helpful for me, like seeing how I was thinking 3 months ago versus like
Yeah.
how I might be thinking about something today. Um, yeah, I think like that's like the most important part, using AI intelligently. You can't just like, in that like context build, like the context is so important. You can't just like use AI and then like um, ask it to do things for you without like it having like the proper context. Because AI has that thing where like if you use Claude, GPT, whatever you use, you'll often find that it's like agree first, question later.
Mhm.
That could kill you.
It's so interesting. Like you were saying, it's the ability. I guess the challenge of like regret. If you use a lot of AI, you always regress to the mean, because AI is deterministic. It wants to get you to the best consistent possible answer. But that's also why you're converging to the same UI UX, the same answers, is because there are best practices. But for a lot of business, you have to be unique. How you stay unique, and it's building your voice, building that context that's really specific to you. Um, I guess now, as we come close to the wrapping up here, how, I guess this is more of an interesting question, because you obviously worked heavily in go to market, is Where do you think the best go-to-market people are coming from? In the States, I've looked in when looking at roles where they're hiring, they're getting CS people to go into go-to-market engineering. In Canada, or I guess the roles I've seen, it's a lot of sales reps or marketers going into go-to-market. How do
Mhm.
you think, in at least a few years, where do you think a lot of these reps will be coming from? Do you think it's going to be more of a technical background, or do you think as the tools become simpler to use, CRMs are less daunting, it's going to be the traditional sales reps getting more to go to market? Have you seen anything from your experiences, kind of where the persona of this type of role comes from?
Yeah. Well, go to market is vast. So like we have
Mm-hmm.
to break down which roles we're talking about. I think like um I was at a conference here in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle Norton was speaking, and
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree with him. I think like the baseline hiring for like a BDR role has not changed for me. It's still what was the meta like 5 years ago. I think is still the meta.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I do think is an interesting thing that's happened, and I've noticed a lot, is like with the like new GTM engineer
Mm-hmm.
role or growth engineer, whatever you want to call it. I'm seeing a lot of data back people coming into go to market, especially into that go to market engineering role. So people who've never had experience in GTM
Mm-hmm.
before, and I think it's like a blessing and a curse. Like I think orgs are transitioning from having like a director of business development or
Mm-hmm.
a sales manager, people who are like in the weeds every day. Like they were the ones that would come up with go to market strategy at a lot of these like 50 to 500 employee companies, um, and they would be the ones driving like the change.
Mm-hmm.
These days, it's like growth in GTM engineering, and I think that's the right approach. But the best go to market talent that I've found is the talent who is both technical enough to build, but also strategic enough that to think. I think that's the combination of the two things. At the end of the day, go to market is just essentially a layer of playbooks that you run. And so the people that are building those playbooks, you need them to both be experienced enough in like the technical aspects of building these playbooks, but also in the strategic thinking. And ideally, you have someone who's been there and done that before, right? Even if it was a BDR, like sales, account executive, whatever past they've had.
Yeah.
The more involved they are and the more they understand the people who are going to be using what they build, the more successful the org will be. That understanding of like the end user is really important.
I think that understanding the end user is a part that's obviously not that's not missing, but it's so easy to overlook because people, I mean, as you know, people think, well, it's like humans are humans. It's just easy. They're
Yeah.
the soft skills are hard to measure and track. And I think where I believe this is, we're going to see maybe a shift, maybe not, especially on enterprise. Where I've seen at least in my day to day is initially it was like these classic sales reps, the golfing, the like very schmoozy, but like very relationship based. Then I saw more on the enterprise side. Then I saw a shift to like pure outbound, the 10,000, 100,000 emails a month. And now I'm seeing the shift back to more relationship based just because it's so easy to send the outbound. It's so easy to relatively make the calls. People are looking for relationships again. So you're getting this new, bringing back a lot of the sales. I've seen a lot more conferences. Before there was no conferences. Throughout my career, no one went to a conference really because they were expensive. I'm getting invited to all these conferences now because the in-person aspects are coming back. So like anything else, it's interesting to see the cyclical nature of what's fresh and new. And I think it's like anything. Once everyone's doing one thing, the next thing is the new hot thing. I mean, I've lived through, I feel like 5 cycles of emails dead, emails back, emails dead,
Yeah.
cold callings dead, cold callings back. So it's always what's new and exciting.
Well, email's dead right now.
Emails very dead. But then I've seen like newsletters come back as well. And so it's always interesting. There's always that new thing. I do think email is hard, just due to the fact it's so easy that's where AI is relatively good. But I think at the end of the day, it's like the classic, the personal relationships are matter. But I always said my whole
Yeah.
career, my dad's like, you need golf. Golfing's where all the business meetings are done. Never got invited to a golf meeting. I'm like, I'm a genius. I'm right, Dad. Now I'm getting invited to pickleball, golf tournaments. I'm like,
Yeah.
because it's this whole cyclical thing. No one was golfing. Now everyone's trying to like, how do I stand out? And it's
One thing I will say before we wrap up, I think like go to market is actually simpler than a lot of people make it to be. I think um, we often like what I find with a lot of companies that I've consulted with in the past or worked with in the past. You'll essentially buy a bunch of different tools, enterprise grade platforms. You'll combine a Nooks, a Clay, I don't know, Outreach, a Sales Loft, Lemlist. You'll buy a bunch of these platforms, and then it's almost like that, that meme of like poking the stick
Hmm.
and saying like, "Why aren't you working?" And I think like go to market is like a lot simpler than people make it to be. Essentially, you just need to combine the best working work playbooks, find a baseline, and build on top of that. And so your foundations in go to market extremely important. I think a lot of companies
Hmm.
skip past this foundation layer because they're trying
Yeah.
to scale so quick, and you start trying to layer on this like intent data that you don't fully understand how to use, and that's where things start breaking down. But essentially, really, your foundation is the most important thing. What is your baseline, and what can you layer on top of that to make it most successful?
I think it's always really important. It's what makes you you, because no tool is going to save your business. However, the right tool will help you grow and scale. I think that's the biggest thing. I've worked for a lot of startups where like we're getting Salesforce, we're going to scale, and I'm like, it's just a CRM. Doesn't
Yep.
help the fact that your sales rep can't close a deal. But if you know what you're doing, using these tools is so much quicker, allows you to scale so much faster. So I think it's an
Yeah.
interesting thing. Again, you said a top down, this AI push for a lot of tooling, but what are we using the tooling for? And knowing your ICP at the end of the day is what's going to allow you to grow so fast. But this was a great conversation. If people want to learn more about you, about the business, what's the best place to get in touch or visit the website?
Cleanlist AI. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Levon Adamian on LinkedIn. So that's the best place to follow up with us, see where we're growing. We're scaling really quickly right now. So got some exciting product launches and some exciting news in a couple of months coming. So that's where you can find us.